Hey, I want to welcome everybody to the Confluence Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Luke Geraty, and I am joined by Colin Coogan. How are you doing, Colin?
What's going on, Mr. Luke? I'm doing just fine.
So where are you right now? I'm trying to, I think I know that bridge. But,
I am enjoying my coffee, hanging out on the Upper Sacramento River in Dunsmere, California.
That's cool. Right on the river, huh? You're standing in the middle of the river with your microphone.
I'm sitting on a little floaty right now, little flamingo floaty, sipping my coffee.
All right.
Enjoying it.
That's sweet. I brought my drone, my new DJI Mini Mavic Max, up here to the Wood River in Southern Oregon, and I'm sitting in this little basket that I designed. So it's pretty neat. So, and actually, right behind me, it's really weird. If you look, you can actually see Dylan Woodrum's boat right there. He's down there fishing with his wife, Kim.
He's out there, 9:47 a.m., and he's out there fishing.
I'm heckling him from up here. So anyway, we want to thank everybody for tuning in and to listening to this podcast. And before we get started on this subject, I wanted to encourage everyone to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And then it would really help us in the analytics side of things if you would leave a review. And if you have any questions or comments, you can do that on YouTube pretty easily. And Colin will have his laptop the next time he's on the middle of a river in his little floaty, and he will respond to every one of your questions about anything that you ask related to fly fishing. So, Colin, what is today's topic? What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about why hire a fly fishing guide, or a guide in general, but mainly fly fishing guides, the importance of it, and just what to expect. You know, I think a lot of people that have never hired a guide get maybe kind of hung up of like, what am I actually getting for this service? What am I actually paying for? And maybe someone that's been on a guide trip and wants a little bit more information of, you know, what to expect on their next trip. This might help some people kind of navigate through those questions.
Okay. Yeah. So all things related to a guide trip. And so maybe before we do that, I would love to, I can share my first story of my first experience with a guide. I'd love to hear your first experience with the guide. We both guide a lot. We have a lot of clients. I have heard some really wonderful stories about people's first time experiences with the guide. Some of them are amazing, and some of them just, I can only shake my head or laugh. So do you remember your first trip with the guide? You were, 3 years old?
I remember my first trip with a guide. Yes.
So tell us details.
It was on the lower Sacramento River in Redding, and it was with my dad, and it was absolutely epic. I want to say it was like a summer day, and our guide opted to not run his drift boat down the river, and we ran his jet sled. And it was
you're talking my language. I'm liking this.
Let's just say it was a bloodbath. It was really cool. We started later in the day, and it was pretty eye-opening for me. I'd fished the lower Sac a handful of times in a drift boat with some friends prior to this. But it was just like seeing his vast knowledge of where to be at what time during the summer was really cool, because we started later, we nipped during the day, you know, we just pillaged up at Market Street, and then he timed it right to later in the evening to where he could set us up down in the mid-lower river to fish dries. And that was, it was just eye-opening of like, wow, there is a vast amount of fish in this river, one, and then two, the importance of why we were paying said guide to take us, because he knew exactly where to be when.
That's cool.
So that was really fun. And then
and how old were you?
I don't even remember.
Were you in your early teens, 20s? Was this last week? Tell us.
This was yesterday.
All right. So
I was young. I was younger in my adult life.
Okay.
Yeah, probably somewhere in there. I don't remember what year it was, but yeah.
No, that's interesting. For me, kind of the same, similar age wise. I was actually a little bit older than that, but I so I'm not going to count like growing up. I grew up with lots of guides up in Alaska with my uncles and whatnot around, but My first actual guided trip was in Montana, I think. And yeah, I was in Montana, first guided trip, and kind of the same experience. You know, I was probably in my late 20s, actually, like 28, 29. And yeah, we pillaged, or as the young children will say, we railed. It was, you know, pretty awesome. But for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'd fished that river before, you know, somewhat successfully, but not like this. This was like, oh my gosh, you know. We did a lot of different techniques, and I mean, I learned a ton that day as well. So, yeah, cool. Okay, so we both have been with guides, and now, I mean, we fish with guides all the time. You make me row you around all the time.
Yeah, and I
Like,
row you around all the time.
you're like, I don't know if
No.
that's proportionally the percentage of times I've actually been keeping track on my phone. I have a little app called the Colin rowing app, and it doesn't check out in that area, Colin. So, your ankle always hurts, or your wrist. So I can't make you row. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about why hire a guide. What are your thoughts on that? Why should someone hire a guide?
I would probably say we'll start more on the destination end. Let's say you're not necessarily from the area that you want to go fish. And the why hire a guide is because it shortens the learning curve. You could be an expert fly angler, okay, and go to a new body of water, and let's say you've never been there before. It's going to cut your learning curve down in half, maybe even more than half. So just the vast amount of knowledge that a guide can have on a body of water is more than you can obtain in a day. So that would probably be from the standpoint of you may be a very experienced fly angler, have fished all over the place, all over the United States, maybe out of the United States. But when you step foot on a new body of water, regardless of your skills of reading water, every river and stream and lake has its own, let's say, local nuances that may take a while for you to pick up on. So if you're limited to, let's say, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, of fishing, it could speed up that process of success for you. So that would be from the kind of more the destination standpoint, in my opinion.
Yeah.
From the beginning standpoint, if let's say you've never fly fished in your life, I think hiring a guide is extremely important from the learning aspect of just the mechanics of fly fishing in general, whether it be casting, rigging, approach to the water, those kind of things. YouTube is a great source for knowledge, but I still think I've learned a ton through the internet over my years of exploring fishing, fly fishing, conventional fishing, you name it. But there's something to be said to someone actually physically showing you the application. So those are kind of my 2 points, I would say, of just the general overview of why hire a guide.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the local knowledge obviously is pretty much a big deal for most people. I hear that all the time from different clients that I guide, who are proficient anglers who have fished a lot. They always say, yeah, I hire guides for the local intel, because I think like two perfect examples for you and I would be two of our bread and butters, the Lower Sac and the Trinity. A lot of similarities if you're indicator fishing in some ways, but then there's a lot of differences. On the Lower Sac, for instance, I had never used a 400-foot drop from my bobber to my weights until I went on the Lower Sac, and I don't think I ever would have. It's when I have, I have a lot of clients that have fished all over the world, go to Alaska every year, fish in Montana. They're always like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge leader system you have, so long, So, and I've been fishing, my whole life, and it took me a while to figure out on the Lower Sac, so the Trinity, kind of the same thing. What do you also think about, though? Fly selection seems to be another big part of it too. Like there are 10 million caddisfly imitations out there. And yet there seems to be in each one of these fisheries that we are on, there's a particular number of flies that seem to work better than others. And so that's another component, I think, that kind of gets into the mix. What for me, I was on a trip once in Montana, and I always, whenever I go out there, I hire a guide out there that I know. And generally what I've done now is rather than go fish for 3 or 4 days and then get a guide, I get a guide on the first day of being out there, because it just dials you in on the fly selection. It's like, okay, cool. So day 2, 3, 4, and 5, I know what flies I need to be in, and that has produced a lot more success for me as well. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So though there are fishing reports globally through pretty much every major river or stream that you're going to hire a guide on, those, from my experience, those fishing
you should say, I mean, one of the things I really appreciate about Orvis is that they have that Orvis, I think it's on their website. You can go and see like every fishery anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like Orvis endorsed guides like Colin Coogan, who are sharing intel, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. So though there are fishing reports globally, they are a little delayed, where a fly fishing guide in season is out on the water every single day, right? And we're changing in the dynamics of the days and figuring out what is the hottest, greatest, latest fly going on, whether it be topwater or subsurface flies. So though you may be able to access a fishing report from a week or two behind, or maybe even in a couple days, there's still going to be some missing parts to what is actually going on the river. So by hiring a guide in that day, he's going to have the up to the moment knowing details of how the fish are behaving and responding. So if you are planning a trip, I personally still do it to this day. I've been a fly fishing guide for 8 years now, full time. And even when I go to a new river, I still hire guides for the first day because I want to know. I know I'm going to get the generic report from that month, but I want to know what exactly is going on. What is the local trip tips and secrets and tricks going on? So I'm going to hire that guide for, if I go to the Rockies or wherever I'm at, per se. I'm going to find out that first day, and then I can be able to go DIY maybe a couple days if I can't afford the guide for 2 or 3 days at a shot. So
it makes sense. The delay factor is legit. It's like, I thought we were using salmon flies. All the fishing reports said we were using salmon flies. I was like, that was 4 days ago. Today they're done. So we're going to be using something else.
So you're going to have with 24-hour information with the guide. And it's not even just within the realm of the knowledge with guides. It's that all of us guides have a pretty decent circle of rings of friends that are also guides, and that intel is getting swapped most of the time. So the knowledge that's flying around on any given week during season is that's why you're paying for a guide.
If you're within the circle of trust, you're sharing intel. So one big reason why hiring a guide can be helpful is because of the local intel, just kind of dialing it in gear wise. Another thing for me, and I think this is what can separate, I think, a good guide trip and a non-good guide trip, is just the overall experience. Especially when it comes to education or instruction. Each one of us, I know all the Confluence guides tend to, really value instructional based guiding, in the sense that I always tell people, like, hey, we're going to go out and we are going to work really hard to catch some fish. I'm going to do my best to use the right flies, setup, etc. But I also want to help people leave that day being further ahead in their fly fishing journey, so they might know how to cast better or mend better. Because for me, I think a lot of it's mending. I think one of the major differentiations between people who catch a lot of fish and who don't in the type of fly fishing you and I do a lot of is mending. Properly mending versus not properly mending. So that's another component of hiring a guide. I think there's a opportunity to have a lot of instruction that happens. And I actually think that's one of the things that I really appreciate from a lot of my clients who are like, hey, feel free to give me pointers, let me know if I'm doing something that's not going to get it done, because that's the kind of proper attitude I think you want to have with your guide. Do you find that being a big component? Because like you and I take out a lot of people who want to learn, for example, tight lining. That's like a new thing. Hey, I want to kind of figure that out. Or swinging flies, spay casting, dry fly reach casts, things like that. What component to your guiding philosophy does instruction play, or do you just not care? You just want them to catch 25 fish? Tell the truth.
I would probably say I lean way more towards wanting to instruct people to get better.
Yeah.
Though this will be kind of a topic that we touch on, how to get the most out of your trip topic coming up shortly. If someone communicates with me, hey, the number of fish today don't really matter, I really want to improve on this, then I'm definitely in my day going to lean more on trying to help them improve on said topic.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, in a guide trip, I don't want to lump everyone together, but a general trend in the guiding community is trying to catch as many fish as possible. So there's going to be a sense of it's good enough.
Yeah.
And I would like to, in my trips, lean more towards on let's get you dialed in for success in the future.
Yeah.
And then let the fish come naturally. Though it does take a little bit more time out of our per se fishing time in the day. I want people to grow as anglers, but it just totally depends on the person. There's some people that really could care less about the why and the how. They just want the results, and that's totally fine by me. I can craft a day and cater to that needs and get you good enough for the day to find success. And if the person's like, hey, I really want to grow as an angler, then let's get down to the nitty gritty and really focus on technique and tactics while you're with me.
Yeah.
And I feel like all of our guides at Confluence Outfitters have a similar approach. It's really what's communicated to us at the beginning of the day of what said person wants out of it.
Yeah.
We can spend all day working on technique, or we can spend half and half, or we can kind of just throw in little tidbits throughout our day on the river. It just depends on how much you personally want to absorb and soak in. And everybody learns at different speeds. Let's face it.
Yeah.
You and I learn at different speeds. Everybody that's getting in our boats or on foot with us out on the riverbanks, everybody learns at a different speed, and that's totally okay.
Yeah. And in addition to that too, I think it's also, people learn in different ways too, right? So some people need to be told, people need to see it. There's just a lot of different approaches to education that kind of come into it too. And I think what you just kind of hinted at, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but it's like super helpful when you know what your goals are and how you're going to measure success for the day. I mean, like with steelheading, right? The measure of success I always try to tell people is that, hey, this is a fish of 1,000 casts. That's the proverbial statement. It's generally considered a really great day if you just hook an adult, never mind landing it. I mean, like you may or may not, I had a day last week where we hooked this really nice adult. We were fighting it for a while. It ate the size like 18 pheasant tail, and it jumped and just popped off. And nothing happened wrong. There was no, it wasn't like the line rod tip didn't go down. Yeah. It was just one of those things where it was like
just did steelhead things.
Yeah, it's just a steelhead thing, and it was great because my client for that day was awesome client from Alaska. Actually, we kind of grew up on, or he fishes a lot of the same rivers I grew up on. And he just looked at me and he was like, man, this is so awesome. We hooked, his attitude was just so like great because he was a steelheader. He knew how it was. Like we just had a successful day, in some way, shape, or form. Now, does it mean that we wouldn't have liked to have held that fish and taken some photos and petted it? Of course, but we wanted to put it in the net. But yeah, so the way we measure success, a lot of that comes down to what the goals are for the day, right? But I think the overall experience too, though, I do want to touch on that a little bit. If you're a parent out there, I've got a bunch of kids, and I can tell you that I have found a lot of success with my sons in particular by going out and fishing with guides. We're fortunate enough to where I've gone out with Kevin Kay, one of our Confluence guides with my sons, and he's able to dial them in a little bit better than dad because they'll listen to him and they won't listen to me, And so as a parent, I think it's also super smart to give your kids maybe that first experience of fly fishing because like I've got one of my favorite clients, shout out to Craig. Craig's brought his daughter and his son up to fish with me for the last, I want to say 4, maybe 5 years now. And I've taught all of his kids how to cast, and they've all successfully landed steelhead on the Trinity. They've caught a bunch of fish on the lower Sac, but like Craig's told me, he does not care. The fishing is like the last concern he's got. What he wants to make sure is that his kids have a super fun time. He knows that I'm going to have, this massive bag of Sour Patch Kids for his Sour Patch Kids for his children, and chocolate and all that type of stuff. So I think the overall guide experience can also be really, really a part of that. Why hire a guide too, though, being able to see, like, I like when I'm on trips with you, Colin, because you always point out these really beautiful natural things like the eagles and the names of all the mountains and the type of trees that are out there and the different types of bark. And I just really appreciate that about you. You're such a great guide. Book Colin. He's great at that kind of stuff. People are going to be so disappointed now when you don't point out a single tree.
Hold on just a minute. My AirPods just took a dive.
Oh, good. I was just giving you props. So for those of you listening right now, Colin needs to invest in batteries for his AirPods. But all right, he's back.
All right, I'm back.
All right, he's back. So what's next? We talked a little bit about why hire a guide, the basic overall kind of the overall reasons why hiring a guide can be productive for people. What's next on the guiding tips?
What a guide trip entails. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what a guide trip entails is booking that.
Yeah, if someone hires Mr. Luke Geraty, what does the day look like?
Okay, yeah, great question. Well, so first of all, it starts before the day. There's generally an email that gets sent out, a couple texts, a phone call. I always talk to my clients beforehand, try to ascertain the goals and what success looks like. So it's helpful when people tell me like, oh yeah, this is what I'm hoping to either get better at. I always remind people what they need to bring. So on my trips, I have rods, I've got all the fishing gear, terminal tackle is all covered, lunches and drinks. So I tell them, hey, make sure to dress for the weather. So if you might need waders, you might not, depending on where we're going to be at. Layering up for steelheading is the key, right? Because you'd rather take things off than wish you had something with you. And then we plan our time where we're going to meet. And so what the guide trip entails is when you first meet, obviously we're going to fill out steelhead cards and take care of some of the state of California's wonderful paperwork. And then, if they've fished with me before, then, I generally know where they're at. But if they haven't, we might do a little bit of casting instruction. On the lower Sac, for example, casting 3 flies, a bunch of weight, a really long leader, and a ginormous bobber. Shout out to Geraty. When we do that, casting is, we do a lot of water loading. So getting people to be able to be successful in that round, and then talking about mending. And then we go out and, do our best to have a really great day. So that's I think the overall gist. Some clients we're going to stop and pull over, have lunch for 30 minutes and enjoy the break. Some clients are going to eat a sandwich as I row through maybe some froggy water or maybe even wait until the end of the day when they're in the truck. So that's the overall experience. That and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And holding tons of 30-inch rainbows. I don't know how you do it, but that's how I do it. How about Colin Coogan days? What's that look like?
Yeah, pretty similar as far as logistically speaking as you. I would say that we're all kind of in the same realm. When a trip comes across my email box, usually you're going to receive some sort of communication from me, depending on how far out the trip is. I generally wait probably a little closer to the trip than most to reach out to people. Mm-hmm. And that's really because most people are going to want specific details on time, place, float location, meeting location. And I tend to try to wait till a little bit closer to our date to make those decisions. But you're going to get a reach out from me, and whether it be text or phone call or email, just, introducing myself. And then once we start approaching, I start asking more specific questions. Like, if you haven't fished with me before, my first question is going to be, just give me a little bit of a background on your fly fishing experience. Give me where you're at right now, because that's going to help me craft our day to find the most success. Whether, if we're on a walk and wade trip, how much hiking do you want to do? Do you want to break up the day into smaller chunks? Do you want to go hike through the woods for miles? Do you want to see more water? And then kind of meet in the middle of what I think is going to fit. So yeah, those are going to be the main questions. And then I try to ask as much as I can, like, what do you want to get out of this day? What is a successful day in your mind? Do you want to hone your craft a little bit more? Do you want to try to catch as many as we can? Do you care more about the why and how, less about the result at the end? So I try to get those questions answered as best as I can. And then when we meet, evaluate those again, and then head out to the river and try to accomplish those goals. My biggest thing is having fun. I definitely love catching fish. I love watching people catch fish, love helping them do that. I would definitely say, though, I lean a little bit more into the Zen aspect of why we're out there. So that is kind of my goals throughout the day and setting it up and what the trip looks like. Just like Luke, obviously all of us provide rods, reel, and tackle for the day and flies. If people have I usually do ask if they want to fish their own gear, and then evaluate if it's going to be applicable for the day. If they have a favorite rod that fits the criteria for the water that we're fishing, by all means, I don't mind rigging rods in the morning to go fish with.
Controversial subject right here.
I don't mind at all, actually. I used to be a little stubborn about everyone has to fish my stuff. The longer I guide, the less I lean towards that, to be completely honest. If we're fishing steelhead and you bring an adequate rod, I have no problem rigging it up. If we're fishing trout in walk and wade environments or Fall River or wherever we're at, and you bring a quality setup that is applicable and want to fish it, I'll rig it up for you. I will have spares with us at all times, so you don't have to bring 1,000 rods, but that is kind of the gist.
Okay. Yeah. I pretty much feel the same way. I will say that I do prefer on steelhead trips to be ready to go. And so sometimes it can be challenging having to re-rig everybody's rods, but by and large, it's not a big deal. So did your camera stop working?
It is frozen for some reason.
Yeah. Well, you look really happy.
both you and I are frozen on my end.
Oh, on my end, I am not frozen. So it's probably your dial-up internet that you're still using, but we can still hear you, and that's the important thing. So maybe you'll come back. All right. Well, what's next? I mean, we've talked about why hire a guide, the local intel, overall experience, instructional nature of things. We've talked about kind of what a guide trip looks like. What would you add to our conversation related to getting a guide?
I would probably say how to, like, the next couple topics that could be addressed real fast would be how to get the most out of your guide trip and how to pick your location for your guided trip.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the wisdom to pour forth.
Yeah, so I would probably say how to pick your location for your guided trip. That would totally depend on time of year for you. If we're going into our springtime. So the first question would be, do you want to walk on foot, or do you want to be in a boat floating down or motoring down a river? So picking those two things in your head, if you feel like you want to go walk riverbanks and explore and stand in the middle of a beautiful river in Northern California, then maybe a walk and wade trip would be the solution for you. Now, if you want to take a beautiful boat ride down a river in Northern California or in one of our power boats, maybe a boat trip will fit you more. I I'd probably say the majority of the people that fish with me through the year do both. They like both aspects of it. They like days or they like to do a couple walking away days and then do a boat trip on the end because their legs are going to be tired. So that's
Colin is booking trips right now.
I am.
People
yeah,
call him.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I would generally speak. How to pick your trip is physically, what do you want to do, and then what would you find the most enjoyment out of? And if you don't know, then just call us and we'll kind of give you the lowdown of what we think would be a best fit for your needs.
Yeah.
Because there's aspects where, like, if you're like, oh, I want to be in a boat, but I want to work on my dry fly fishing. Well, potentially during that time of year that you're wanting to go, dry fly fishing may be better on foot, depending on where we want to take you. Or if you're like, I really want to work on my stack mending or whatever it may be, whatever technique we may put you, be like, well, we think being in the boat will be better. If you say you want a steelhead, but want to be on foot, we may say, hey, covering river miles may be a better option. So we were going to suggest you be in a boat, right? So there's different scenarios of how you pick your location in the trip. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I think how to get the most out of your guide trip, and how to pick your location. Those are related things. Having that conversation initially and just knowing what your goals are is super helpful for your guide.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, so if you can just say, hey, this is my experience level. In fact, when I think about all the clients that I think have had the most success over the years, it's generally that. And we have lost Colin, so stand by. We're going to get him back. And we're back. Colin had a little bit of a technical difficulty. The beauty of editing is here. So we were talking about how to get the most out of your guide trip, how to get your pick your location. And I think what I was going to say finally would be listen to your guide. That's a big part of it. Trust your guide. There's a relationship obviously that's developing, but we're going to tell you our opinions on things based off of what's fishing the best and maybe what's going to be a fun location. For example, Colin, would you agree that if someone said, hey, I'm never fly fished ever before, I really want to go do it, there might be some places that would be not best for that first experience. Is that accurate?
100%.
Yeah. Would you tell them?
Say that again.
Would you tell them? Would you say, listen, it's been real tough out here. You have to be able to throw a size 26 midge pattern and stack mend it down river below the boat for 100 feet. Would you say that?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Because I feel like you did that to me once.
I just literally got an email yesterday from someone, and they expressed they wanted to do something, but they also expressed they had limited fly fishing experience. And I just opened up the conversation to, hey, I think where you're currently at may be a little advanced for what you're wanting to do. I'm not opposed to having that conversation, but that conversation, if you want to proceed with that venue, is going to be tough, but we can focus on, trying to accomplish the goal, but focusing on educational and coaching and trying to get you up to speed a little faster.
Yeah, technique.
But I also suggested an option that would fit their needs a little better for right now.
Yeah.
And then moving into that advanced option the next trip. So we're not, if you're dead set on maybe something, whether it be Spring Creek fishing on Fall River or steelhead fishing, one of maybe our more quote unquote advanced venues where you need some basic skills already going into it, just to help your day speed along a little faster and find success. We're not necessarily going to say, no way, Jose. If you really want to do one of those things and it's your first trip with limited skills, the conversation just may go into more depth with me or Luke or whatever guide you have.
Okay. So
hey, this is going to be challenging. just know that we're going to try to set the expectations a little bit different.
I was just going to say, part of the how to get the most out of your guide trip, I think, has to do with expectations.
100%.
Yeah, so it's like if the expectation is, hey, I've been out here with some real sticks, some women and men who can cast really well, men really well, can get it done, and they're struggling. You can help people kind of reasonably. Okay, all right, yeah, because that's I feel like a big part of guiding is managing people's Actually, a big part of life is managing people's expectations, right?
And your own.
Yeah, I mean, just that's kind of what it entails, and so yeah, I think that's it's kind of cool. On the Trinity the other day, you'll think this is hilarious. I was pulling out at one of the boat launches, and there was this guy walking around with a spinning rod or bait casting rod of some sort, and he said hi, and I said hey, and then we pulled our boat out, and I was kind of locking everything down. We're getting ready to get out of there, and he walked up to me, and he's like, hey, yeah, I thought it was you. You're Luke. I think I've watched a bunch of your guys' YouTube videos. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Thanks, man. And then he said, he's like, so do you guys ever take out like first timers? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that's 50% of the people I take out or at least a big part of it. Maybe not quite 50% anymore, but I was like, yeah, all the time. We definitely one thing I really appreciate about Confluence, all the guides, seem to be very open to taking out first timers or people getting into it. And I just said, yeah, we do all the time. And he's like, okay, so, what does that look like? And we were on the Trinity, and I said, well, my recommendation, honestly, if you haven't fly fished, I think the lower Sac would be a great starting place to get some of the basics, and we talked about it for a little bit, gave him my card and so his expectations though, it's like, yeah, he was well aware, like, I've never cast a fly rod. I just want to learn how to do it. Is it even something that I can start? Cause it was pretty cool. He was like, I'm turning 40, and for my 40th birthday, that's my new goal, is I want to learn how to fly fish. I was like, dude, that's a great first goal for the into your 40s. But yeah, so anything else to add to these questions related to guiding?
No, don't wait.
Okay. Well, let me, maybe this is kind of related to how to get the most out of your guide trip, but in preparation, let's talk a little bit about how as a client can prepare.
Yeah.
Do you want people to go to their local park and do some casting? Do you want them watching YouTube video? And what's your, like, what would be helpful? Like, I'd say I was a first timer, or maybe I've fished. Okay. Typical client. I fished, once or twice a year, maybe a little bit more. I've done some trout fishing. Maybe they've done a saltwater trip. I don't know all your clients, but what would you say would help them get the most out of their trip?
Oh, as far as like what to be practicing for, so this is the tough thing. You definitely need to know where we're going and what type. You could be asking your guide what type of casting we're going to be doing. Because if you're out there practicing your double haul with a dry fly or a sinking line, and we're going to chase boppers down the river, that is not applicable, right? Mm-hmm. So that is going to be a tough part. Now, if we're going to be going fishing the Spring Creek and we're throwing a lot of dry flies, then those things are applicable to be practicing your overhead casting, things like that.
Yeah.
So ask your guide what type of casting you're going to be primarily doing on your trip. And then those are the things you can be, if you are if you want to go practice your casting or things like that, getting prepared for the fundamentals of what we're going to be doing. Preparing for your guide trip and what kind of weather you're going to be in is very important. So knowing what gear to be bringing for your trip, whether that be boots and waders or, specific shirts and jackets that you'll be needing for your trip. Those are very important questions to be addressing with your guide if those questions haven't already been addressed by your guide.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually probably bring it all. That's in Northern California, bring it all, because like in March, we might be fishing in rain. We might be fishing in snow potentially, or it might be 75 to 80 degrees. And, you're going to need short sandals and, a sun shirt. So having a decent amount of your gear with you can help you avoid needing to go and purchase all new things. Although if you do, support your local fly shop, pick up some cool stuff. But yeah, those are some good advice, figuring out, because I mean, that's happened many a time where I've been practicing my double haul. I'm like, cool, here is your size 900 bobber. You're not going to be able to double haul this thing right here. You can try.
Most of the time, if we're fishing out of a drift boat on our tailwaters, we are going to be doing what we call a water load cast, or we're going to be doing a forward facing roll cast.
Yeah.
There's really no river runs through it, Brad Pitt, aerial shadow casting going on.
Yeah.
Those are used in places that we use sinking lines, dry flies, those kind of stuff where we're doing the overhead casts.
Yeah.
So the technique and method of what we're doing varies.
Yeah. So preparation wise too, another thing this can just save you a lot is, so we were talking earlier about river reports, which can be very helpful to give you general ideas. But at the same time too, river reports, it can be as much as like 5 days previous to your fishing trip, and could be intel that's no longer applicable. Yep. So I would say, don't worry. I mean, like right now, all of our steelhead rivers are completely blown out right this second.
But in 2 days from now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they're going to probably be in really great shape. So, you want to definitely, hold those things loosely. The weather app is the same thing. That's why I go back to saying, I tell people, I say, bring all the warm clothes, but then, shedding may happen, because, like you and I have had that happen multiple times where we check the weather app. We're like, oh, we're good to go tomorrow. And then you show up and it's just dumping rain when it was supposed to be, 65 and sunny. So I guess hold things loosely, be clear about what your expectations are and what you want to accomplish on that day with your guide. And you can make the best of those trips. Communication is the big thing, probably the most, it seems like. So, well, before we wrap this thing up, where have we been? And, we're talking about booking trips. If people are starting to think about booking trips, what can be on their mind?
Yeah, so personally, still very steelhead focused since the last time we talked. Still been fishing the Trinity during our windows of opportunity out there over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. I suspect another at least month of good fishing in between storms. So we're going to still have steelhead opportunities for another month on our Trinity River. That's the place to be, especially if you can catch it just right. So you can just
February
give us a call and we can kind of give you a rough idea of if the date that you're thinking in mind is going to work. And then looking forward, we're starting to push our springtime fishing. It's going to come real fast. Come March, April are some of the best months, in my personal opinion, to be fishing the lower Sac. That's right. I've been trying to start booking those days out. And then spring is close. We're potentially mid-March to April, we can start getting walking waiting. So Upper Sac, Hat Creek, those are all places that start to fish a little bit on the early side, depending on our flows. So winter comes and goes fast, and we're right back into trout season. So there's lots of awesome opportunities over the next 3 months to get out and fish.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the Trinity in February and into the first week or two of March can be absolutely fantastic. Lower Sac is hard to beat in the spring. Once it starts warming up, I mean, we're going to have a ton of PMDs start popping off. We'll have a ton of Mother's Day caddis. Those little black caddis will be all over the place. So it's pretty great. And then, I think even, like you said, the walk and wade trips can be really fun, depending on the flows. The Upper Sac is really fun once it starts to come back in shape. But you also have summer will be, you talk about spring being here. I mean, spring's just around the corner, but the summer hex hatch on the Fall River is going to be here really quickly. And so you'll if you're if you're looking at wanting to get a day out with us, what I would recommend doing is give Andrew a call at the 1-800 number, or go to confluenceoutfitters.com. And if you give Andrew a call, Andrew's really great about being able to kind of like, if you're kind of curious of what would be a good option for you, or if you want to fish with one of us, you can give us a call or a text or an email. But you can kind of figure out like, okay, this is what I want to target. This is what I want to accomplish. Where can I go? When can we do it? Etc. So, yeah. Well, anything else, Colin, before we wrap this thing up?
That's about it.
All right, sweet. Trinity's been fishing good for you, though?
Yep. Still finding good fish every outing. So can't complain with that.
Yeah, I know. I was actually, it was kind of funny the other day. Kevin K called me. It was actually yesterday. And he's like, hey, have you been on the Trinity? He was kind of curious. And I guess I sounded kind of like a Debbie Downer because of maybe the current weather. I was like bummed. I was supposed to be on the river today, tomorrow. I'll probably be able to go out on Thursday, but I had to reschedule these 2 days. But I was like, yeah, it's, and he's like, yeah, well, how'd your trip go? And I said, well, yeah, one day we hooked 5 adults, and the next day we hooked 2, and he's like, those are great days. And I was like, oh yeah, those are great days.
Yeah. Those are fabulous days.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But anyway, yeah, it's been a good season this year. I feel like, it's been fun out there. And so hey, thanks for listening again. I want to encourage you to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us, do all those things on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. But again, it would really help Colin and I if you could leave a review. Let us know also in the comments, questions you have.